But could it happen again? We report from the Isle of Man. And from London's West End, how the city have found a way for the small investor to buy a share in the glamour and the excitement of those first nights.
Well, the minimum investment's £1,000, but it depends a lot on your tax status. If you're in a higher earning bracket, it pays to put more in, because you get a better ride.
But first, the dispute involving the print union, the NGA, and the messenger group, and as an investment haven. The story behind the demo after the break. Reminder of tonight's main story. Hundreds of trade union members have been converging on the Messenger Group printing works in Warrington. We've just heard there are about 200 there. Hopes of avoiding the mass picket were dashed when ACAS said there was no basis for new talks between the firm's management and the NGA print union. The TUC is meeting now to decide how far it's going to go in supporting the NGA. And now the day's business news. Ford's biggest plant at Dagenham in Essex is split over the company's 7.5% pay offer. The 2,000 foundry workers at Dagenham have rejected it, and so has the transit van plant at Swaithling. But 3,000 people on the Dagenham day shift accepted the offer, along with smaller plants at Aveley, Basildon, and Treforest. Another 3,500 workers at Dagenham are still to vote. It now looks as if the decision will be close. Union officials expect to know the outcome by Friday. United Biscuits have rejected a union plan which would have kept its Merseyside factory open and saved up to 2,000 jobs. The company announced in June that the Edge Hill factory would close within 3 years because of the declining demand for biscuits. The union scheme, drawn up with advice from management consultants, would have saved United Biscuits about £5 million. But after looking at the proposals for 2 months, the company said no.
It was very strong, and if I may say so, one of the most impressive trade union documents that I've seen. The contents, some of were sound, but didn't go towards the total figure that we wanted. The company need £20 million to make themselves secure in a very competitive market in the next 5 years. By closing Liverpool, they will save £10 million, and the best estimate from the factory plan was between £4 and £5 million.
More than 1,000 telephone engineers who are involved in industrial action against government plans to privatise British Telecom will go back to work next Monday. Their union, the POEU, has agreed terms with BT, but another 1,500 people will stay out. The CBI president, Sir Campbell Fraser, is resigning as chairman of Dunlop. Recently there's been criticism of his management style, but Dunlop insists the move has nothing to do with the company's performance. It lost £80 million last year. Triumph motorcycles will be on sale again in 6 months' time. A West Country businessman has bought the title and designs for the bikes from the Meriden Cooperative, which went out of business in September. The London stock market was again overshadowed by the city's biggest ever takeover battle for the insurance group Eagle Star. The German company Allianz says it'll decide next Monday whether to bid again for the group. Yesterday, its £900 million offer was topped within minutes by Bats Industries. The FT30 index was up 2.8 points, and on the currency markets, the pound gained 0.1% against the dollar, and 0.1% also against all major currencies. In New York, a few minutes ago, the Dow Jones average was also up 5.28. A financial conference in London, designed to convince investors of the attractions of the Isle of Man, hit an unusual problem this morning: a picket line. It consisted of enraged investors who'd lost thousands of pounds in the collapse of 4 banks on the island in the last 2 years. They were demanding compensation from the Isle of Man government and warning possible future investors of what they regard as the unacceptable risks of the Isle of Man.
Well, this demonstration this morning is to show our total protest against the disgraceful, negligent and callous Isle of Man government who won't refund 8,000 starving depositors who are left absolutely penniless, destitute and homeless on social security as a result of 4 bank crashes which the British public must be made aware of.
But haven't the Isle of Man government tightened up the regulations since the crashes?
They have. They may have tightened up the regulations now, and they go around telling everybody all over the world that they have tightened up the regulations and that the Isle of Man is an excellent place to use as an offshore international centre. But you can't start a new clean sheet without cleaning up your back door first and paying back all these starving innocent people.
Well, there's no doubt that many savers did lose money when the banks collapsed, and a good deal of confidence in the Isle of Man as an offshore financial haven was also lost. So I went to the island to see how the authorities have tried to rectify matters. It was in the summer of 1982 that the tranquility of this holiday island and booming offshore finance centre was rudely interrupted. Athol Street, the island's financial and banking centre, was shocked by the failure of the island's largest independent bank, the Savings and Investment. It shut its doors owing more than £40 million. In the next 12 months, 2 other fringe banks folded. Writs followed and government reports were commissioned into the affair. At the heart of the matter was a system of self-regulation aimed at bringing banks and other financial institutions to the island, free to enjoy an attractive tax environment. They contributed no less than 25% of the island's economic activity. But the freedom was abused. People lost their money and the government had to act. So shocking were those events that it was perfectly clear to everybody that something had to be done. Something that would not only protect the money people placed in banks on the Isle of Man, but also something that would protect the integrity and stability of the island as a financial centre.
And we've made some amendments to our laws which now enable us to control banking companies even though they lose their licence or surrender their licence. We can still control them until we're satisfied that the depositors' funds have been protected in the best way we can.
What about the people who lost their money when those banks folded? Is the government going to do anything to try and compensate them?
At the moment, the government's policy is not to accept responsibility for the actions of the directors of those failed companies. Take the view that we have a large number of institutions in the island. Many of them, the majority of them, are connected with large UK companies or international companies. And depositors did have a fairly wide choice of banks in which they could invest their monies. And we do not feel that the government should accept responsibility for the shortcomings of directors of banking companies.
Nevertheless, the government are determined to rebuild the island's economic self-confidence, both in the world of finance and of manufacturing. A new freeport will be built on this greenfield site beside the airport. Planning regulations will be relaxed. Raw materials and finished products for export beyond the common market will be duty-free, and as many as 1,000 jobs should be created.
And we see both the financial sector and manufacturing as being the twin pillars upon which our economy is built. The Freeport offered us a way of increasing our already very attractive range of incentives, and we decided that as a projected 20% of world trade is going to go through Freeports in the next 5 or 6 years, that we couldn't miss that particular bus.
How much of a headache were the financial problems of the banking collapses in mid-82?
Clearly, it was of concern to the government that 1 or 2 institutions went under. But in many ways, it's been of advantage to our long-term planning, in that we now have probably the most sophisticated supervision system in the world. It often happens, you know, that once you've had a problem, the attempt to remedy that problem and prevent it happening again in the future produces a system which is a very sound system. And we found recently that a lot of people who've come to the island have been very impressed with our range of attractions and with our new regulations. And we've had several very large institutions come to the island since the problems we had in our financial
jail. In Athol Street, they've got over the worst and confidence has returned. The banking system is now under tighter control, and now insurance companies underwriting risks abroad can tax-free status under new legislation. In itself, nothing new for the insurance world operating offshore, but an important vote of confidence by government in Athol Street's good behaviour.
I think it's most unlikely that you're going to get a sudden rush of people coming in here to take advantage of lower taxation rates than other places, and see that.
We'll have to let them go. Pity. Maybe it's not such a pity.
Been the case, and I very much doubt it will be the case. Again, I emphasize that the island is looking for quality. Perhaps are the cornerstones of the concept as far as the island is concerned.
Commercial life goes on in the port of Douglas, just half a mile from Athol Street. Bright new plastic pound notes have been issued, perhaps heralding a cleaner and more durable banking system. These notes will last at least 15 years. But are government, bankers and insurance men confident that the future is now fully secure?
No one could ever give you a categorical answer on that. I think the assistance we have brought in means far greater protection for depositors in the island, but no jurisdiction could ever guarantee that a banking company or any other company would never do anything foolish.
I can't possibly guarantee that nothing will ever go wrong. Good heavens, that would be absurd. But I can say that the likelihood of it going wrong is much diminished as a consequence of the action that has been taken.
The receivers are still ploughing through the books of the collapsed banks, and banking inspectors have prepared a full report on the difficulties. Until these reports are published, today's demonstrators won't know whether they'll ever see any of their money again. After the break, the latest from Warrington, and how you can become a theatrical agent.
Talks. Mr. Gromyko held the